Medical Director at NEMRA. Now, this is based out of New Bedford and North Dartmouth. Thank you for coming in, Dr. Miller.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
As folks have been reading GoLocal, we've been reporting on more and more lawsuits being filed by residents of Brady Sullivan properties, and there are a number across the state. And Dr. Miller has actually been seeing a number of these folks who have been alleging that they've been adversely impacted by living at these properties. So talk with us about these people who have come to you specifically from Brady Sullivan buildings. And in your experience in dealing with folks, you deal with allergies on a daily basis and pathogens. What have you been seeing?
Well, there appears to be a cluster of patients from the mill who have shown me photographs and documented evidence that there's a problem both with mold as well as bird droppings. And so these type of exposures typically are patients that I see on a regular basis for the last 30 years working with old mills in the New Bedford area. Most people are presenting with either allergy symptoms or other respiratory symptoms, including asthma, skin problems, headaches, things like that.
And when you see them, let's talk about, first and foremost, how can they be treated? When you see this in this particular unique reaction to living in these properties, what do you do for these patients?
Well, the first thing is to take a history and document what you're dealing with. So you want to make sure that their symptoms coincide with what they're being exposed to. After that, most of the treatment is certainly treating the complaints that they have, whether it be some allergic rhinitis or hay fever type symptoms, asthma or other respiratory symptoms, or skin rashes or other things as well. But the truth be told, the final resolution for most of these people is to actually move out of and get rid of the exposure.
So when you see these people, and you say it's a cluster, so do most of their symptoms resemble other people who lived in the similar property?
Yeah, surprisingly, when you see patients like this in one building, many of them are presenting with the same symptoms. So that kind of gives you a clue that they're all being exposed to the same thing on a regular basis. So, some people might have one condition, two conditions, or three conditions, but when you see so many people coming from one place and you have some supporting evidence that there's an exposure there, that kind of gives you an idea that they're all being exposed to the same thing.
And you talk about mold, but you also talk about bird pathogens, animal droppings. What does that present in an individual?
Well, that presents in a sense with shortness of breath. It can be wheezing, other respiratory complaints. It's been known in the past as farmer's disease, where they get moldy hay, or it's also been told to be pigeon breeder's disease. So when they've been exposed to the pigeon droppings that are in these old buildings, they actually develop a certain type of antibody that actually gets into the lungs and can cause chronic lung disease.
And oftentimes we see building owners of any old building say that they're going to go in and remediate. Is that effective, in your opinion, to stay in a place if they said, we're coming in with the suits on, or we're going to take care of this for you? What do you say to patients in that sense?
Well, if adequately remediated, then this should not be a problem. So you have a building now that they said they remediated, but patients are all having symptoms. So you have to question the degree of remediation that actually went into the building. So if there's still evidence of problems, mold, for example, just doesn't grow out of nowhere. Mold grows in dark, damp places. So if there's a problem structurally with a building, you can put up paint and drywall and things like that. But mold actually grows on a cellulose-based structure, so drywall or anything like that, that's where mold grows.
And so when you see these patients and they say, Doc, I'm still living in the place I'm exhibiting these symptoms, is it safe for them to live there?
My suggestion to all the patients have been so far to move. Prolonged exposure just makes the condition worse. And then you don't know what these people are going to suffer years out. If they have a predisposing condition, it could get worse. If they didn't have anything and they develop it and stay there, it could get worse. So all these things come into play, but the truth is, as like with any occupational lung disease thing like that, the thing is to either fix the problem, which in this case is a big mill, or move.
And so folks, they're looking for a new living opportunity, living space, and they go, how can you know for certain when you go into someplace new or old in this instance that your health's not going to be impacted?
Actually, you don't, and that's the problem. You have to rely on the builder, the reputation of the company you're dealing with, because you can look at a nice white painted wall, but if there's mold behind the wall and you don't see it until afterwards, it's a problem. So even, for example, the people in the mill today, with the recent They said they fixed the problem before, but now they showed me pictures of water coming into the apartments. So they'll show me what they can see, but it's what you can't see that's the problem.
And you're simply from the health perspective here, but you see these people come in from living in old mill buildings. In this case, it's particularly the Brady Sullivan properties. But they're on average people, average jobs, renting or having condominiums, oftentimes up against big developers who are going to say, legal up and say, your health problems aren't our concern.
Well, I've seen this for 30 years. I mean, I practice in New Bedford area, which, you know, typically the Fall River, New Bedford area is filled with old mills. And most of those people actually live in Section 8 housing, which has a 3-year wait list. So when they come to me for these kind of problems, I tell them this is the changes that have to be made. But unfortunately for those type of people, they can't move. They don't have the opportunities. So they're dependent on the landlord to actually fix these things. In this instance, people, you know, might have the opportunity to move. But the bottom line is that either the problem gets fixed or they have to move. And that's really what it comes down to.
So I know you can't talk names, but numbers, how many patients have you seen from the Brady Sullivan properties, would you say?
So far about 20.
You've seen about 20. And these are big buildings. Do you anticipate seeing more folks coming
My
coming
schedule
forward?
is full so far with people that are yet to come.
Well, I wanted to get you in here again to talk a little bit about the symptoms, a little bit about the fact at hand, again, just old buildings. Is it, again, really up to the developer? Have you seen good old mill buildings?
Oh, sure. I mean, across the street, there are some good old mill buildings, but you really have to, but the problem is people don't know. And for example, the people that are having problems now that are moving out are seeing people that are moving in, and those people don't even know what they're up against. And so that's the problem.
And moving out, if you leave a place that you're exposed to mold or these bird pathogens, can there be lingering symptoms past the time of, especially if there's underlying conditions? I'm sure for some folks it's the magic bullet to be in a new environment, but for some folks, could this problem persist?
Oh, sure. I mean, for example, if you're predisposed, we know, for example, children who are predisposed to developing asthma or allergies, if they didn't have the condition but exposed to a certain degree of dust or mold, that kind of thing, then develop the condition. So that could prolong itself.
Well, anything else folks should know while you're in here as the expert of seeing folks who are exhibiting symptoms of environmentally based allergies? What would you say to folks?
Well, if you're buying a house, get a good home inspection. So that's always critical. Take a look for that. You know, and then if you have problems, you really have to deal with the builder or the developer and assert your rights that you really have to get this fixed, because it does have short-term as well as long-term health consequences.
And have you seen, speaking of rights, again, in other instances, people get recompense, get basically a result from what had happened to them?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of people with these conditions over the years, and you know, like I said, it's a constant problem. It's, you know, even insurance companies now put riders for mold because they know it's a problem. But we're dealing with old buildings and old construction. But if done right, it doesn't have to be this way.
Well, Dr. David Miller, I appreciate your taking the time to come in here. Again, you've read about these lawsuits on Brady Sullivan, on GoLocal Prov, but you've seen a number of patients, 20 you said so far. I appreciate your taking the time to come
Thank
in.
you.
I'm sure we'll talk soon. Dr. David Miller, Medical Director at NEMRA in North Dartmouth, thank you for taking the time to come
Thank
in.
you.
I'll let you go around the corner.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. That just about wraps up another day here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. You can check out, we were up at the State House earlier. There's gun legislation before hearings, both on the House and Senate side. I had the opportunity to talk with both sides, supporters and opponents. Be sure to check that out. Molly O'Brien was at 3 o'clock. Great show. She had an awesome lineup. And 4 o'clock, packed show for you. We had Jennifer Lawless, Lynn Singleton, Joseph Molina Flynn, and Dr. David Miller. I appreciate your taking the time to watch. We appreciate your feedback. 3 o'clock tomorrow is going to be Rick Simone with The Taste. I'll be on at 4 with a great lineup as well. Keep an eye out for weather updates on GoLocal Prov as we continue to track the storm with the help of our meteorologist, John Guy Orsi. And just want to say, everyone, have a great, happy, healthy Tuesday night. We'll see you back here tomorrow in the studio in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.